Hello, I'm Jesse Berger, founder and artistic director of Red Bull Theater. I hope you and yours are all safe and healthy. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for a special conversation and celebration of Erica Schmidt's extraordinary production of Macbeth. All of us at Red Bull are proud to produce the New York premiere of this work and are thrilled that its ongoing life as a theater project and the rapturous reception it continues to receive. This Monday at 7:30, we will continue our Red Bull Theater live series of online readings, reuniting members of the original companies of some of our previous off-Broadway productions, with The Witch of Edmonton, featuring Charmaine Woodard. All of us at Red Bull are grateful to be able to offer these new ways to share experiences with our community of artists and theater lovers during this unprecedented time. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Erica and these great actors and designers. We're all looking forward to your feedback, which you can email to us at feedback@redbulltheater.com. And now I'm very pleased to introduce your wonderful host, Red Bull's associate producer, Nathan Winkelstein.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on Facebook Live as we celebrate Macbeth. I am your host, Nathan Winkelstein. Today I will be joined by a number of guests, all of whom were involved with our production of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Our production has just received 3 Drama Desk Award nominations for Outstanding Revival, Direction, and Best Set Design, as well as a Lucille Lortel Award nomination for Outstanding Revival of a Play. We couldn't be more thrilled to bring together some of the remarkable women involved in the production for this special live stream celebration. We'll take questions later, but feel free to type them in at any time to your Facebook chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Our first guest will be the Drama Desk Award nominated director of this production, Erica Schmidt. She has directed on and off Broadway, as well as across the country, and most recently directed Cyrano for the New Group. But first, how about we have a little peek at this extraordinary show? Hi, Erica.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
And congratulations. I should start with congratulations on your director nomination. It is extremely well deserved, as well as both nominations for Outstanding Revival of the Play. It was such a special play for everyone and for us at Red Bull, and bringing in young audiences and diverse audiences and audiences that so many people claim Shakespeare doesn't speak to, and you created a production that speaks to all people, them and all of our standard Red Bull crew. I would love, if you're okay with it, to start with, I think, the question that most of us have, which is how this concept originated for Macbeth, the school women performing it. If I remember correctly, this started with a gig at Juilliard. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I was trying to break it down into kind of 3 big ideas. In 2015, Juilliard asked me to do a 4th-year Shakespeare play with 4 women. And I immediately wanted to do Macbeth because I was thinking about these Juilliard actresses, these women, as schoolgirls at school at Juilliard. And I was interested in what it would be to see the witches done straight as young girls. the ingredients that are all put into the cauldron are actually would have been homeopathic type remedies back when Shakespeare wrote the play. And I was really curious what it would be if there was no hocus pocus involved, but it was just a real action, that these were just young women putting these things into a cauldron to try to make a paste or a potion. And, Shakespeare's full of unctions and poisons and potions in Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. So that was sort of my first impulse, was what is it if these are young women who aren't playing anything but themselves and they are the witches? And then the second kind of layer of idea is about the language in the play. And the play has so much gendered language. They say, now I am a man again, quite unmanned in folly. When they get dressed, they talk about manly readiness. Let me feel it like a man. When you durst do it, then you were a man. And I was really curious about what Shakespeare was writing for a company of men. So I thought, well, what would it be if it was a company of women? It's also the first time that Shakespeare's audience would have heard the word un. So to undo what's done cannot be undone. And I think that when Shakespeare is being played, Shakespeare's always aware of Shakespeare. It's like all the world's a stage, but also the stage is the world, right? You're always doing a play when you're doing Shakespeare. It's always theatrical. The language is theatrical. And because he was creating this use of un for the first time, I think he was not trying to say that something was the opposite. I think he was trying to say it was both at the same time. So something was not, it's like it is and it isn't at the same time. So I had this theory that if you have women saying these lines, that they become the un in a way, that it's Brechtian and distance, but at the same time, it unsettles. It feels it has a kind of nervous, unsettling feeling that I think Shakespeare was going for. Okay, and then the third part of the concept is, I think the play is really about a man, a human, who is standing at the edge of the worst that one person can do to another person, murder, and thinkingly and knowingly and feelingly chooses to do it. I think that Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are a happily married couple who are ambitious and don't have a child, and they're presented with an opportunity and they choose to do that thing, to do the worst thing possible. And the play is about everything that happens afterward. And because of that, Macbeth is murdered and beheaded at the end of the play. And as I was thinking about it as a concept with these four women, I didn't know how to end it. And I did some Googling about young women and the occult, and I came across the Slender Man case and the Schuyler Nice case, both of which were really unfortunate true crimes in which young women went into the woods and stabbed their so-called best friend with kitchen knives. So I thought, okay, taking all of these things, what if the audience thinks that they're watching this concept and they go on this ride for for watching these women play at the thing, and then they actually do it. So it is undone. The concept is undone in the end. And I had hoped that ideally that would restore the original horror to what it is to take a life, back to that concept of the play being about what it is when you kill someone. So that's it. I hope that's clear.
It's remarkably clear to me, actually. It's a wonderful, and he does, obviously, Macbeth kind of, he talks about murder quite a lot, or she talks about murder quite a lot, and is concerned about that, and I believe even creates the word assassinate. I think it's the first time it's used, so that makes sense to bring the horror of the murder back. It's sometimes easy in these plays to just go, yeah, they died with a fake broadsword, and not really contemplate it. And for those of you who saw it, and for those of you who didn't, I can promise you, the ending of this play does bring back the horror of what it is to take a life. It's really quite extraordinary. Thank you. I guess my second part, maybe of the same question, you talked about how this started at Juilliard with 4 women. I actually think I have a photo of that. It started at Juilliard with 4 women, and it obviously our production had more than that. So there must have been evolution along the way. And in fact, this has taken a number of steps. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the path it took to get to Red Bull and then also to the Hunter production, and what those steps were that caused the evolution that did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we start the rehearsal process for this, and it's been done 4 times, 5 if you count the workshop in Seattle. But every time we start, I say that, you know, we stand on the shoulders of all of the women who've done it before, and I feel like the play is deeply indebted to all of the actresses who have worked on the adaptation, and I really hope that we get to do it again. And I'm really grateful that the Drama Desk nominations include the Hunter Theater production as well as the Red Bull production, sort of linking them together. But yes, it started at Juilliard in 2015 with 4 women. And there are sort of 2 things that came out of that. One was that I was thinking of, you don't do the casting as a director at Juilliard, the teachers do the casting. And I had in my mind that I was working with schoolgirls, which was really naive and silly of me. But they're, you know, women at Juilliard. And so I was thinking of it as a theater, as theatrical, because it's a drama school. And then at the same time, thinking of them as schoolgirls. So the concept was, you know, uniforms. And Jessica Paps did the costumes from Juilliard to Hunter. She's done it all the way through. And they're these schoolgirl uniforms. But then the set was much more like a theater. And we did the first reading on the first day of rehearsal. And I thought, oh no, something's really wrong. I was like, I turned to them and I said, we either have to throw out the set or we have to throw out the costume. It doesn't work. But it was too late and I'd messed up. So there was nothing to be done. But as a result, the stage was floorboards of a theater, and they ripped the floorboards up to put the cauldron in. And it felt more conceptual. And then the other part of it was that, as only having 4 women, when Banquo doubled as a witch in the first scene and then also in the banquet scene, I felt personally that it was like a bridge too far. It was conceptually, it was difficult to follow the story. So I was really excited about the idea, and it got a great kind of strange response. People had really dramatic reactions. We had somebody pass out, and people stood up, and people yelled, and it felt alive. It felt fun, and I really, really wanted to keep going. And so I brought it to a bunch of people, and Braden Abraham, the artistic director of Seattle Rep, said he was interested in doing it. So we did a workshop to grow it to 7, and I chose 7 so that it would be Macbeth, Macduff, Banquo, Lady, and then the 3 witches. And we did the workshop, and then he said he would do the production. So we did the production, and moving in, it was really important to me to have girls, school age, high school girls. I wanted it to feel almost cinematic, completely kind of learning from the Juilliard production, have it to almost feel like the side of a road. So it was, in working with Catherine, the set designer, we letterboxed the stage. So it had a portal. So it was almost like you were looking into a screen or through a window at a slice of life. Even the soliloquies were not delivered to the audience. And we talked about delivering them to the trees. It was very much like a movie. And I wrote a prologue for the show that was, you know, just like, hi, you know, who's Beth today? Like very casual. And we did it. And the very first preview, the audiences, they laughed so much. And it wasn't, I want the play to be funny. I think that's great. But it felt like they were laughing at us. That it was funny that young women were doing this play. And that felt wrong and kind of devastating. And so after the first preview, I cut the prologue, and we just started without apology with the text. And that really did change the laughter. And so, you know, then we did the run in proscenium with the letterbox at Seattle. And then Jesse Berger from Red Bull came to see it and said he wanted to move it to Red Bull. And he was really keen to have the Lortel be experienced in a different way. He wanted to not do it proscenium. And so we figured out the thrust configuration. And then I think it was in tech, maybe Isabel will remember, but we realized that there was no way you couldn't talk directly to the audience in the thrust. It was so clear that the relationship was completely different. And it did change the way that the audience perceived the play as well. It wasn't, it was funny, but it wasn't quite as funny. And then moving from Red Bull to Hunter, we changed cast just based on actor availability, and conceptually it didn't shift, but again, tonally it shifted. I think the audience at Hunter is very different from the audience at Red Bull, and it was perceived in a slightly more serious way than it had been previous. It's like each incarnation, people start to take it more seriously. I don't know. It's a funny metamorphosis, but that's it.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. I wonder if it might be worth getting some perspective from one of the performers, Sophie, has actually now been in 3 levels of the production, and the set designer, Catherine, has designed from Seattle on. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Sophie was 16 when I cast her.
Well, yeah, exactly. So let's add them to hear what they have to say about the evolution from the point of view of acting and set design. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Sophie.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Catherine, congratulations on your incredibly well-deserved nomination.
Thank you.
I think because Erica was speaking specifically about some of the evolution that happened in the set, well, let's start with you, Catherine, about what you found going from the proscenium at Seattle to the completely recreated thrust at the Lortel to the black box thrust at Hunter, and how that affected your extraordinary set design, which I will show some pictures of while you chat.
With the proscenium, it was much more like watching a movie almost. There's more of a separation between the audience and the action, I think. And also with that production in Seattle, we had more shop support. So they had a dedicated shop on site, which made certain things a little more possible. We also had a bigger stage and a much higher grid. So we were able to do things like trees, like Erica mentioned. We also had a street lamp. But then moving to Red Bull, we had to reconfigure everything to work within this thrust stage. And the theater's ceiling was also much lower. So we had to reconfigure everything to simultaneously work with all of the blocking that we knew we wanted to incorporate and the fight choreography, but also continue hiding some really key technical elements to make a lot of the effects work, because there's several sort of acrobatic and special effects through the show, like the rain that you can see in the pictures. And there were certain things that we still had to hide from the audience with much more visibility in the thrust configuration, and pathways that we had to keep open. And we wanted the pond to remain central and really visible and visceral for the kind of climax of the play. So we kept that in the center and used various detritus in the pond to try and hide different theater magic mechanisms.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the incredible accomplishment of both making it rain indoor in an ancient off-Broadway New York house, and also creating, for I don't have a good picture of it for the audience, but creating a pond in a stage, which is also, as you can imagine, not actually the easiest thing to do in the world, and has, without giving it all away, though we've probably danced around it, has a heck of an ending. That pond is very, very useful to that ending, which the audience who hasn't seen it can probably try to imagine. And it was truly, truly an accomplishment to see you recreate it both at the Lortel and then again at Hunter. Sophie,
Yes.
you've been with this production longer than any other actor. You've been through 3 iterations, starting, Erica said, when you were 16?
17.
17. Okay.
I
Well,
auditioned when I was 16.
jeez. Well, that makes us all feel terrible about ourselves. Thanks, Sophie. And, can you tell us, from the point of view of an actor, how it changed for you moving from Seattle to Red Bull to Hunter?
Sure. I mean, kind of just echoing what Erica was saying, it's really fun to think back on how it has changed, and especially at Seattle Rep, because that was so long ago. That was in 2018. And so, I mean, I think at the beginning, the proscenium shift to then into a thrust and directed dress, I think was probably the biggest shift as an actor. Like, the relationship to the audience, that became huge and really important. And obviously the stage, like learning how to sprint around when you're cutting super tight corners, and what do you do when that fails? And so that has been a huge shift. And then also, I think just the energy of the play, like, I sometimes forget about like that prologue, like Erica mentioned earlier, because it was really, we only worked with it, I think probably, well, we rehearsed with it, but only performed it like one day. And it was just one of those things where we did that first preview and we came off stage and we're like, nope, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We have to problem solve. So watching how it's shifted, and I think very much like at Seattle Rep, we were living very heavily in the girl world of the play, and we were relying on our adolescence and our spunk, I suppose, of girl world a lot, which was really fun. And then when we shifted to Red Bull, we switched a little bit more to like relying on the text specifically and saying, no, we need to nail down the story of Macbeth, and that's what we're doing, is we're telling Macbeth, and that comes first. Oh yes, look, a picture. And the other thing we'll say is that it's just been a joy, because working with these 3 casts, honestly, because I've now worked with upwards of probably like 24 women on this play, and that doesn't even count the Juilliard cast or all of the Seattle workshop production. And it's really fascinating seeing how new women approach this text for the first time, or maybe it's not their first time, but approach this adaptation for the first time, and how it really does rely on the women who come before, and that it is all a family. And it's been really fun just working with Erica on that and seeing how that's changing, and how each new actor brings something like completely new and unexpected and fabulous. And every time we do this, we focus solely on the text, and there's always so many new discoveries, which is somewhat surprising sometimes, because when you're focusing on something for so long, you think, oh yeah, like I got it. And then, you start working on it again and you're like, oh my God, this new secret that I've uncovered, and it unlocks some excitement or secret or, I don't know, fun game to play. And so that has been, I would say, probably the most magical.
Well, so I have to say, I couldn't have asked you to give me a better transition in terms of actor evolution and character evolution and so on and so forth. I think what it's funny, each time I talk to a single one of you, I want to just spend an hour talking to each of you, but we have to fly. And I'm going to invite on a few of the other actors now. These are the actors. This is Isabel Furman, Brittany Bradford, and Ishmenia Mendez. That's 2 Macbeths. You get 2 Macbeths for your money, and 1 Lady M, to talk a little bit about those characters in particular, and the growth and changes between different productions. And I'm first going to show us a little a clip of the first time that we see these two characters together on stage. For those of you who are watching on Facebook and need a quick brush up, this scene happens after Lady Macbeth finishes reading a letter from Macbeth telling her that 3 witches, of which Sophie was one, have promised that Macbeth will be king. Lady Macbeth then invokes the murdering ministers of hell to help her carry out this prophecy, as she's concerned that Macbeth is too kind a person to do what must be done. And at the end of this invocation, Macbeth arrives home.
Nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold! Oh, great glums! Worthy Cawdor! Greater than both, by the all hail hereafter. My letters have transported me beyond this ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant.
My dearest love, Duncan comes here tonight.
And when goes hence?
Tomorrow, has he purposes?
Oh, never shall sun that morrow see. Your face, my fame, is as a book, where men may read strange matters.
To beguile the time, look like the time.
Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it.
Betty, I've actually never seen that before.
Me neither.
Well, I'm glad I could start us on some surprise. Thank you all for joining us. It's so exciting to have you all on from all across the country. I think we have the country pretty well in a stranglehold amongst the people in this room, which is very fun to do. I thought that it would be really interesting to talk about how this very famous relationship for all those Shakespeareans out there between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is affected, and what you learn about this relationship through this particular concept, the concept of 2 schoolgirls playing the roles, getting very involved in the roles, and how that helped you discover new things, where you found challenges, where you found opportunities, etc. I wonder if we could Isabel, would you mind just starting off this conversation? Then we'll roll from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we first, did a run through of the show, and obviously, you work through each scene separately, and then we put it together and we do like a first run through, which is like so early in the process. Something that Ishmenia, Erica, and I had to like work on a lot. And honestly, it changed so much even throughout tech and then throughout previews, was specifically this scene, because so much about this scene relies on Macbeth being a very big, muscular man of war who has a kind heart. And when you put 2 women in that situation, I mean, Ishmenia as Lady M is like the most intoxicating and like incredibly powerful force that not much is said in the scene, and yet so by Macbeth, and so much has to come through about their relationship and about it being this partnership and having it been that they've gone through so much together. And so there was such a balance that we worked on to sort of strike in terms of their relationship being on this equal level, and that Mac didn't have to be this like big guy, but could just be powerful because of how great their heart, like his heart is. And so it was really interesting to like workshop and play with that scene. And it did change so many times. And I was like, before, when we were talking about this over email, discussing this relationship, I was dying to see a clip of Brittany and Ishmenia doing it, because I'm sure it was a completely different scene, because that was something that we worked on so much throughout tech, and based on like our audiences coming in and seeing how people reacted. And obviously Erica's looking at the entire arc of the show, and when you're in it, you don't see it. You're just like feeling those feelings and working opposite somebody as amazing as Ishmenia. it was one of those things where their relationship really, I think, found itself in that scene. And it was once we kind of clicked that scene in that everything else seemed to make so much more sense throughout the rest of the show.
Thanks, Isabel. And yeah, we looked for that video clip and we couldn't grab it. I was going to ask a follow-up, but actually one of our Facebook people have gotten to it first. Kelsey asks, there was such a sense of history between the characters, and how was that cultivated in rehearsal? That's a similar question to what Isabel just answered, but I would be curious for those of you who don't know, just because it is a little confusing. The nominations were for two productions of the same production, slightly altered. That was probably less clear, but it happened both with Red Bull Theater at the Lortel and then moved to Hunter. And at Hunter, Brittany performed Macbeth and did so extraordinarily, as did Isabel. And as Isabel said, what was great about it and being able to see both was they were extraordinary and different, which requires a really, really brave, smart mind from everyone involved, right? It requires a director not to force something on someone. It requires a partner in Ishmenia not to force expectations on, and it requires a new actor like Brittany to come in strongly with their own opinions and their own person. And all three of them accomplished that to an extreme degree. And so, Brittany, I would like to ask you this question first. How did you and Ishmenia create a history between your characters for us to see?
Well, I mean, first, I loved seeing that clip because I also have not seen what it looks like. So I was like, wow, this is that scene. It's so fun. Just to see you two do it together is awesome. First, I think I got lucky because I saw the show at Juilliard. I actually saw the one that someone passed out, Erica. I don't know if we talked about that, but I was a first year. And they were fourth years. So I got to see it. So I had a little bit of an idea of what the play was about in this concept. And so then going in, I was really excited to play, and Ishmenia was a wonderful scene partner, and Erica was really wonderful about table work still happening, even though they had already done the play and had already probably understood what to say. And it allowed me to say, well, could the girl be like this or could it be like this? And when we worked on it, Ishmenia was really wonderful about, how do we connect? What are our names, our girl names, and how do we know each other? Are we like the theater nerd girls, or do we play sports, or whatever that thing is? And that was really awesome because we got to, I think, put in our own versions of it together. And then I think the other thing was Erica, we talked about the couplets that end a lot of these scenes. It was really fascinating to see, when do they actually end in a couplet? When is it a couplet and then Macbeth has a line, so really they have more power? When is it a couplet and then Lady Macbeth, so then she has more power? And just the evolution of their relationship is really fascinating. I don't know if that makes sense, but the three of us got it.
No, that made perfect sense. Thank you.
I do think, if I may,
oh, please.
I think there's also something about, in terms of how the characters gain history with each other, there's something about this production that Sophie sort of alluded to, that it is actually like real life stakes that these women are experiencing on stage. They are bombarded for rain for 8 minutes. The turf is wet and slick and dangerous. They are flipping couches, flipping their bodies, flipping each other. And what I have witnessed in watching so many evolutions is that the cast is unlike any other show I've rehearsed. The cast is off book. They're on their feet way earlier, and they take care of each other in this really extraordinary way that every single group of women that have done this, they form this like really intense bond because they have to actually physically take care of each other. It's really amazing to watch.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. And I should say that is something that comes across unbelievably clearly from the audience's perspective. Is there's something about watching a show where everyone is so in sync with one another, and everyone is watching out for one another and likes one another and cares about one another, that just kind of transports the audience in a very particular way. And both productions, both the Red Bull one and Hunter one, just bled that feeling. It was a very, very, very compelling aspect.
We could so feel, I think, on stage every night when something was going, I don't want to say the right way, but when something was really working, because we're all on stage the entire time, you're all aware of it and you're all aware of what people are reacting to. And so it kind of builds this like excitement, which I think the girls who are performing this play have, which is like this go at it, throw yourselves at the material, throw yourselves on the ground, like just attack it with as much veracity as like young women do when they're obsessed with something that they love. And every night was so different. And when you would have an audience that you were looking at and you could, because, you know, we spoke in thrust to the audience, like you could see how it was hitting people. And I think you could feel what somebody was saying was affecting everyone just by sitting on that stage. And so it kind of, in a way, it ups the stakes of the real situation that these girls are in, which is that they're falling deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole of this play, and they're just getting more and more invested in the story, and it just goes too far.
Yeah.
And it felt like that every single night in the confines of this incredibly safe space, because like we did form such a bond. I mean, like we knew when there was like a little mistake or something that had happened, like someone tripped. I mean, it happened all the time. There's so much more like care in terms of how we would all go around this, you know, little slip up or whatever to carry each other through to the end, because we were all in it together. We don't leave the stage the entire time, which I think is so it doesn't happen often in theater that you're present for every single part of the show, you know?
Yeah, no.
And just
please.
Well, to echo that, I think that was one of my favorite parts actually of it, is that we are all on stage the entire time, and it goes by so fast. And if any little thing happens, you know, if the part of the stage is slippery, or if a prop maybe got pulled out of the backpack on accident, you have to get everybody on the same page. And so the little whispering or being like, hey, now you just watch out for the stage left corner or whatever, and being in the world, but having to be so consciously aware, it's the adrenaline is just constantly right at the surface, which is actually what the play is asking for as well in this version. So it all worked together in a really lovely way.
Right. You can't ever phone it in. Otherwise, you're literally putting yourself and your other actresses in danger. Like, you have to be completely alive, completely aware, completely in tune with your coworkers, with your sisters in arms over here. Otherwise, like, shit will go wrong.
And can I ask you, Ishmania, if it's okay, can I ask you for, both of these characters obviously go to very extreme places in this play. And on top of that, they are schoolgirls.
Mm-hmm.
And so that what they didn't see of the clip that we showed is the speech that comes right before it. And that is, it's just one example of many for all of you of like a level where that how do you marry the fact that this is a girl who is performing as part of a group of girls to this extraordinary language that Lady M is delivering, and how did actually the concept of the schoolgirl help you find new avenues into those speeches?
Well, I honestly don't think that there is an age that is better suited to getting lost in fantasy and blood fantasy, in blurring the lines between reality and dream. And so that actually just makes it even easier to tap into the bloodlust, the love, the lust, the like all of the things that are so heightened in Macbeth. Being a teenager is so heightened, and it is so easy to escape reality. It is so easy to not have any understanding of what is real and what isn't, and to be completely lost in that. And so it actually facilitates it.
Yeah.
Macbeth's, did you feel the same way?
Yeah, you go ahead, Britt, and I'll follow you.
100%. The carrying away of it all. I think that the thing that I love so much about Shakespeare is that it is primal and it is visceral, and the language, the action, everything is front-footed. But I think a lot of the times what happens is, as adults performing it, we can cover it with that lens of like, we're adults and we have it all figured out, and this is my performing being part of society, and it loses the visceralness of it. And I think putting it in this time when you're a teenager and hormones are high, it allows the truth of it to actually be more present. And then when you couple that with the genderness of it that Erica talked about before, all of it's the talking about the man and manhood and all of that, it's a performance. Gender is a performance as well. And as a teenager, you're putting on different coats and trying to figure out who you are in that time. And so it all feels like, let me try this on. What is it to be a man? And let me put that on fully. What is it to be a woman? And put that on fully. And I think it just adds into the layers of the play as it goes on.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that I loved what you just said, that the gender is a performance in and of itself. And I think that when I first read the first, first draft, ha ha ha, but like an early, like one of the earlier drafts of the script, like what I loved is Erica wrote at the beginning, like they speak completely unaffected and they're fully in the stakes of the situation. And it was really fun, I think, to not just perform Shakespeare fully in the text and on the line as these characters, but we weren't girls playing boys. That was something that we talked about a lot, is that we're not girls playing boys. We're not playing to be men. We are just fully invested in the stakes of the situation, which makes what Erica was saying earlier, the humor of this like manly dialogue kind of come to light in a whole new way when it's coming out of the mouths of young women. And then on top of that sort of layer, I think there was so much meat to sort of find in the stakes of the situation and in the energy that we created every single night with each other, and the playfulness that you can bring to something, that you can add new light to it that makes it more relevant for young people because they can see themselves in it for the first time. And they can see and understand what's being told because they're watching somebody that's like, oh, that's like me, I'm that kind of girl. I was obsessed with this. And you watch people play these parts and you start to understand the dialogue and what is being said in the story in, I think, a whole new way. And that was, I think, my favorite part about doing the show was the young people that came to see the show and felt like they were able to understand Shakespeare for the first time, which is something that I've always loved and kind of felt like I was a geek for. And then you get to make something like this that makes it accessible, not because of any other reason, the fact that it's a good story. And if you let young people play with it and have fun with it, and especially young women, you can make it so much more. I don't want to, I'm trying to think of the right word to say, but I think it was just more, people could absorb it in a whole new way. And they could fall into that trap of like, what does it mean to take a life? And what do these stakes really mean for these characters?
Right. When the people doing it are the picture of innocence.
Yeah. And that makes the I think the ending so powerful in itself is like, we weren't trying to make fun of it. We were trying to, at the end, I think people were saying, like, why are they laughing at the end? And it's like, because it's something horrible. And that they don't fully understand that what has been done cannot be undone. And the audience is kind of left with this feeling of like, why? Why does this happen? And Erica, we talked about this a lot. Like there doesn't have to be a reason why. Very often you don't get a reason why. It was really, really cool to leave an audience with that every night, and to also like ride the roller coaster that is the show every night with all of you.
Once again, you've perfectly segued for me. It's really quite, it's kind of working out very conveniently. I think the audience and frankly myself are tired of my questions, so I'm going to open it up a bit to them, and I'm actually going to add back in Sophie, hi, for these questions. And actually, this is a question that pops right off what you were just talking about, Isabel. This is from Rebecca. Mm-hmm. And how does it feel for all of you to be a part of a production that is so meaningful to individuals that don't typically see themselves represented in Shakespearean productions? I wonder if we could start. Brittany, could you take this first?
Sure. Yeah, it was an incredible. This is the hardest thing that I've ever done, and one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done, getting to play this part. And I can't. Being a Black woman on top of that does not escape me, and I have a certain amount of experiences that led me to be my version of Macbeth. And that does have to do with my experiences as a woman and as a Black woman. And so when there were people that looked like me who came and saw the show and maybe saw themselves represented, it was incredibly powerful, and it made me feel indebted to them to be truthful as possible. That doesn't mean that I have to be their version of what that is, but it means being absolutely true to myself. And it was an incredible gift that Erica gave me to be able to do this part.
Thank you, Brady. Did any of let me ask Sophie, actually, if you could, just talking about it from a youth perspective, because I know we had a number of, no offense.
Well, so
but we had a number of student matinees during the Red Bull time, and I remember that it was just sort of mind blowing to these kids that people who looked like them could do this. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember we had a lot of Q&As in Seattle, specifically after every single show. And I remember sometimes people would ask me how old I was, and I don't mind answering. So sometimes I would say, oh, you know, I'm a senior in high school, because I was at the time. And every single time I said that, people gasped. And I was like, well, I don't exactly look 25, so I don't know what you were thinking, but no, it's actually kind of funny. I was thinking about Isabel's comment earlier about how she feels when young people who see the show I think it was Isabel, come away with a newfound passion for Shakespeare. And frankly, that was my experience just working on this show, because I was so young when I started, and when I first read a draft, and when I auditioned and got to say these words for the first time, I was so young. And so it did that for me as well in a lot of ways. And it gave me that love for Shakespeare and love for the language that I don't know if I necessarily would have cultivated as young as I was if I hadn't been involved in the show.
Well, I have to say, just from a selfish standpoint, professionally, I'm very glad that you're into Shakespeare now. But I am trying desperately to find some of the questions that were asked earlier, because they were great and I couldn't grab them. And I so apologize to whoever asked this question, because I can't find it, but I'll do my best to show it. This was a question about the physicality of the show, and about how you guys managed that on an 8-show week or 7-show week, and what was required in order to do it safely and sustainably. Ishmenia, could you start with that one?
Yeah. Honestly, it does go back to some of what we have already said, where it was an unparalleled level of trust and sisterhood. Of having each other's backs. So if somebody slipped and fell, we knew how to take care of that person. We had things hidden in the set to take care of ourselves. And it's a testament to these women and to how in tune we were with each other, that there wasn't a lot. Like we managed to really have each other's back in a huge way every night. And it's unlike anything I'd ever experienced in another show. But yeah, the physicality was very intense, and there, to the extent of the combat, but then also just like what we were doing to our bodies every day with the rain, with the whatever. And but I think we all understood and were very much game because of why we were there, because of the young people that were coming to see the show, because of how exciting it was to, as young women, take ownership of a play that has been so male for so long, to take ownership of our potential for violence, to take responsibility for each other and for ourselves, and what we were capable of on that stage, and what that stage was capable of. It was doing that play every night for eight times a week is a feat, was a feat. And I remain incredibly proud and in awe of what and how we did that.
Yeah, it was certainly one of those shows where it's like you hear the trope occasionally that actors are athletes, and it is true, but I don't think often people believe it. If you see these productions, you believe that everyone on those stages is an athlete. It's absolutely incredible what you guys did, and the level of prep that I know went into doing it safely and healthily every time. I have a question here for Erica from Sammy. What was the biggest? I'm going to adjust this slightly. What was the biggest fear you had while adapting, while making the adaptation of this play? What most worried you about taking it to such an extreme place?
Well, the thing that worried me is in the run of the show, every time in the thrust configuration at Red Bull and at Hunter, I worried so much about the actors. It was, directors and anyone involved in the production gets a performance report at the end of the night, and I would just, on pins and needles, like, please say that someone wasn't hurt. This show, it was very scary to watch. Also because these actors threw themselves so fully into it that Sophie, she had to run so fast in the show, and every time she did it, I was just terrified. And then at the end of the play, there's Brittany and Isabel both went underwater and had to breathe through a snorkel for 4 to 7 minutes, which is an actually life-threatening feat, which was actually terrifying to witness. Even knowing what was happening. So I think those were really my fears were for the safety of the actors.
Yeah. Can I bounce off that? I think the biggest thing about the show was, I think as actors, we're always prepared to trust our castmates emotionally. And when you're doing a play, you trust the audience to be there emotionally as you're going through what these characters are going through. And it's a completely other animal to learn how to trust your cast completely physically too with your entire life. Because you're like, we're sprinting around the stage, it's slick, it's wet. Like, there were days where people would slip and fall. Accidents happen in general, like on any project that you do. But to do it in a show that is, it's not like you can stop the train from moving. The show must go on, and you are aware of that constantly. And I think that this trust that we all built, and the reason we all bonded so much, is because we all understood the stakes of not only the show and the story, but the stakes of the situation that we were putting each other in together every single night. And it made the play just as much fun as it was like exhilarating and scary at times. And I think when we were in rehearsal, not even with the water, we had been practicing the water part of the stunt at the end separately. When we were very early in rehearsal, like through a first run through, we were doing fight call, which is when you rehearse every single day before a show. You rehearse the fight sequences, so that way there's no mistakes and there's no mess ups, hopefully, right? My finger got stepped on, and I remember I just broke down crying, because it was like the first time, I think, because I'm one of those people, I was like, it's fine, I'll put my head underwater for 7 minutes, like, I'm killing it, we're great. And it was the first time that I actually was like, ow. I was like, this is the first time I had gotten like minimally hurt. And I remember I cried, not because of the fact that I got hurt, but because I felt so emotionally open, like so raw. And then on top of that, I was like, oh my God. And it was there actually that I think we found Mac in that moment. Erica told me, but it was one of those things that I was like, why am I crying? And I got my finger stepped on, and it was just because I was so open in every possible way. And I think that's what made the show so special. It was the fear we all had every single day in a great way.
Can I piggyback on that?
What?
Can I piggyback on that? I think there's something about Shakespeare that asks that you are totally present on every line, and that's the way that it's structured in the meter and the way that the line ends fall. And I think that for his audience, it would have felt present because it would have been new and there wasn't anything else but the words, and no distractions really. And I think that there's something about being young that there's a intensity to the presence, and then there's something about all of these difficult circumstances that are happening on the stage with the rain and the slickness and the kind of near life death stakes that sort of contribute to that, to the original text, to being like dropped in on the line. And I think there's more.
Erica, I lost you just slightly. So it was almost a perfect transition.
I'll piggyback off of that real quick.
Yeah, please, Brittany, because this will be actually, let's make this our final. It's got to be good. It's our.
Oh gosh. Okay. Okay. Pressure. No, but going off of like the fear and all of the things compounding and really having to think even more about it, that it all lends into Shakespeare's language and all of that. The direct address in such a small space did that as well. That was at first a bit of a fearful thing for me, because I think sometimes when you're in proscenium or when you're a little farther back in a traditional stage area, you just see darkness and you can kind of go off and you know, it doesn't always, sometimes you're not as present as you would like to be, or that you don't realize you're being present. And when there's only 5-6 rows and people are right there and they're looking at you or not looking at you, it really requires you to say, all I can do is be right here and be present here. And even though it's scary, I'm just going to stand here and be with you people on this day. And I think that helped the teenageness of it, the presentness of it, the fear. It's fearful, but in the right way. And just to sit in it and not to try to hide from it. Is that a good last comment?
Well, it was great. It was a great last comment because, of course, presence is both so essential for an audience and cast, but is also essential in today's world where it's hard to be present with other people. And so let me segue. Let me thank you all for your presence. Thank everybody for watching, for being with us today, and for coming together as a community. The congratulations again on all of the nominations. For those of you who are interested, the Lortel Awards will be live streamed this Sunday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. and the Drama Desk Awards will be live streamed on Sunday, May 31st. Also, don't forget to join us for our second Red Bull Theater live reunion reading of The Witch of Edmonton, starring Charlene Woodard, this Monday, May 4th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you are able, please do consider making a tax-deductible donation to support Red Bull and invest in the vitality of classical theater for a contemporary audience. We're committed to continuing connection during this time of COVID-19, and your support will help make this possible. Thank you all again. Thank all of you for coming, and stay safe, stay happy, stay sane, and stay indoors.
Thank you.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye.